A chaotic finish in New York seals a comeback win for the Knicks in game two and has the Sixers looking for answers, and the Lakers had everything rolling, but the Nuggets were unstoppable late in the game. Is the series over? And the Magic can't score as Cleveland takes a 2-0 lead in that matchup. It's playoff action. We're breaking it all down. Today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On NBA, your daily podcast covering all things around the association. However you may be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, the co-host of Locked On Heat, and with me today is Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked On Thunder. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I've got a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Rylan, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Hanging in there. It's been a great run so far in the playoffs. Every home team has held court, and they've been able to win every game so far. No upsets as of yet. So I guess as many people might have predicted, there have not been many upsets, unlike last year. It seemed like there were a lot of teams that were able to split the series early on. Of course, there's still more basketball left to be played during these playoffs, but we'll start off. We got a big show today. We'll talk about the Knicks comeback win. We'll talk about the Nuggets coming back to win that one. And unfortunately, the Orlando Magic keep struggling. We'll get to some news from around the league as well, as JJ Redick of ESPN and his own podcast, of course, gets a head coaching opportunity in Charlotte. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but we'll go and start the show in New York, where the Philadelphia 76ers were looking to tie the series with the Knicks. Tyrese Maxey, who had been questionable due to illness, started off the game on fire, helping Philly build an early lead that they'd hold on to for much of the game until the Knicks clawed their way back midway through the third to set up what was a wild finish. The Knicks had a 1-point lead with 2.5 minutes left in the fourth until Maxey, who finished the game with 35 points, scored 5 straight, and a Kyle Lowry free throw gave Philly a 5-point lead with just under 47 seconds left. Lowry misses a second free throw, however, and the rebound gets batted around, eventually gets passed out to Jalen Brunson, who hits a huge three-pointer, his only one of the game, actually rattled in and out, and then got a really fortuitous drop. And with 27 seconds left, Lowry goes to inbound the ball and makes a wild pass to Maxey, who bobbles the ball, falls to the ground, and with a Sixers coach, Nick Nurse, attempting to call a timeout, which we'll get to a little bit later, the ball is stolen, winds up in Dante DiVincenzo's hands. He launches a three, misses that. The rebound is gathered by Isaiah Hartenstein, and DiVincenzo gets another chance, hits the three this time to give New York a 1-point lead as the Sixers standing there stunned. Joel Embiid, limited by injury, immobile. And now what's happened, everything is completely chaotic. Nobody knows what's going on. Maxey drives, misses a layup in the next possession. The Knicks are fouled, and they finish with a 104-101 victory to take a 2-game lead in the series. Right. Let's start with that finish, because that was pretty wild. What did you think of everything as it was playing out there? Obviously, Joel Embiid not at 100%. You could clearly tell that he was limited, really couldn't challenge for much of the rebounds, but just pure chaos there from everything to that Brunson drop from three to the next possession where DiVincenzo gets 2 attempts. What were your overall thoughts on that ending?
You could not have had a worse ending to this game if you're Philadelphia. And I just think that it was so uncharacteristic of a team coached by Nick Nurse to look like that down the stretch. They get up an 8-0 run with 21 seconds to go in this game, and they just kind of lose it. And the biggest criticism for me is the sloppy inbound, the no timeout. Because they didn't grant you the timeout, you still could have advanced the ball on the free throws and got a better clean look off for the chance to go ahead and win the game. But instead, it's this disoriented Embiid launching one from the hash, and it just had no shot of going in. And you're just, like you said, stunned in the garden. I think that I would have expected a cleaner game from the Sixers down the stretch. And especially whenever you're looking at Nurse and Lowry and Embiid and these kind of older guys who have been in this spot before, I think that this series, for the Sixers to pull off an upset, they had to get a game like this. They had to split in the Garden, and they didn't. And so it has to be really disheartening if you're Philadelphia, especially the way you saw it crumble, because you survived the Embiid, immobilization, you survived the injury scares, and you were able to, at one time look like you were going to head for a 1-1 series, which for the road team is all you can really ever ask for. And yet, just like that, after a 35-point night from Maxey, a 34-point night from Embiid, which even with a healthy duo, that's the kind of goal each night, you still could not beat New York.
Yeah, Jalen Brunson's struggled for most of the game. They were really challenging him defensively. They were trying to make those entry passes into him a little bit more difficult, following him on pick and rolls, and he just wasn't able to get most of the looks that he's accustomed to getting. He wasn't getting to the line nearly as much either, so he was not having a great night, and again, wasn't able to hit a three-pointer until that last one with seconds left. But the Embiid thing seems to be defining Philadelphia's efforts so far, and you can really see it. Like he's been laboring, obviously, whether it's looking tired or not really being able to do enough in terms of like rebounding and just basic things that we've seen him be able to dominate. And you could really see it on those last couple of possessions where he's just kind of like rooted to the ground there. He's just not able to get any kind of lift and challenge Hartenstein, bat the ball around, do anything. And then to your point, that inbounds by Lowry, that was just, I'm not sure what he was thinking there. Like, obviously, this is a savvy veteran, a championship player, possibly even a Hall of Famer. And he makes a wild pass there as time is just running out. And you're just hoping to eke out the clock. And he just makes a really bad pass. And then to top it all off, as Maxey's down the ground trying to corral the ball, you see Nick Nurse, you see Nick Batum on the far corner of the court also signaling for a timeout. Neither is called. So this is a problem because now we're finding out after the game that the Philadelphia 76ers organization is planning to make a formal protest of the officiating over the first two games. Do you think they've got a valid case, not just because of the timeout, but also in general in the way the games have been officiated?
Yeah, I think they have a valid case, especially in this particular instance of replaying this last stretch, because if you get that timeout in, like you said, all you got to do is regroup, inbound the ball, and this game's completely different. And that determines a series. I mean, you just hardly will ever come back from an 0-2 deficit in the first round. Not to say it's impossible, but you're certainly now behind the eight ball when otherwise you'd be feeling at least pretty decent considering the circumstances. And instead, it feels really bleak for Philadelphia. And so I think that they absolutely have a gripe. Now, outside of this timeout aspect, I'm not one to go after officials too much in the postseason because I believe that we all know the rules. Like, we all know that in the playoffs, you're going to get away with more. You can be more aggressive. You can play a more physical style of basketball. So then we can't act surprised whenever it happens the first few games of the playoffs. So I'm not too concerned with the rest of the officiating, but that moment right there in and of itself is worthy of a protest. And I think, you arguably, could make the case that they should win the protest because that does dramatically change the first round.
Yeah, but I feel like historically these protests never really end well. Like it's not going to overturn anything. It's not going to really change them. Like, I guess at best you can hope that the officials go in there with that kind of clear idea, and maybe Philadelphia will get some more favorable calls over the next two games. But I think we've seen the general officiating trend really different since the All-Star break, obviously, and a lot more physicality has been allowed. We've seen that, free throws are down around the league, and it's certainly, like to your point, it's going to get less during the playoffs. So I don't know how much it'll actually change. I think ultimately the Sixers just look done without Embiid being able to dominate the way he did earlier in the season. So it looks like they're going to need a miracle in order to try and even up the series in Philadelphia. But that they'll try to do their best to bounce back. They got a couple of days rest. They can regroup. They can figure things out and maybe figure out a way to limit Brunson and DiVincenzo and everybody else. That New York team, I don't know. I haven't really talked to you about it. Obviously, we've never had the chance to, but with every game, they remind me so much of the team I cover in Miami, just that kind of grit, that just the never dying aspect of them, the depth that always seems to have one player or another step up. You had Josh Hart playing every single second of tonight's game too. Seems like he's constantly playing 48 minutes. It's a really fun group to watch. What are your overall thoughts on the Knicks and maybe even being potential contenders moving forward?
Yeah, I think that New York is the best shot, not just because of the 2 seed, but because whenever you look at Boston, like you cannot outplay them in terms of matching them in the East with star power and with just an overall lineup of really good players. What you can do is maybe muddy things up and then get enough from Jalen Brunson, who I'm glad you mentioned before, has not had a Jalen Brunson game. Like, we've seen him already through his young career become a legitimately good playoff player. Look what he did in Dallas whenever Luka goes out against Utah. He keeps the Mavericks in that series and wins the series for them as Luka's hobbled. Like, he can do that. I think he'll do that this series and beyond. So you have a guy like that in Brunson, and then you have all these defenders to throw at Tatum and to throw at Brown. Maybe you can make things murky. Of course, the Celtics will be the overwhelming favorite out East, as they should be. They're the best team in basketball. But if you want to talk East contenders, who else do you think has a chance to even slow down Boston than New York? And so with that raucous crowd, which is going to be in it and is going to cause an avalanche. Now, granted, the Celtics have been through plenty of wars. This is not going to be new to them, but it still is a slight advantage at least. I think that the New York-Boston series, as long as we get there, will be one of the best this postseason.
Yeah, that sounds like a good summation right there. But we'll talk a little bit about a fun series out west as the Lakers had control, and then, well, they didn't, because of course the Denver Nuggets are still the NBA champs, and Jamal Murray has no fear no matter how much he's struggling from the floor. We'll talk about his buzzer beater after the break, and we'll be right back here on Locked On NBA. I want to talk to you about our friends over at Monopoly Go. We've heard us talk about it before, but you know what? If you haven't checked it out, now's the time, because we've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime, the scoreboard is not looking good, and then that's when you're feeling low. You're not sure whether or not your team can pull out a win, and that's when you dig deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but not on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. And there's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and you can charge other players rent for those iconic properties that you've known all along. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on that game face, and download Monopoly Go now for free over at the App Store or on Google Play. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, what's that? Well, it's America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports apps and players, and you pick more than or less than stat projections on 2 or more players, and you watch the winnings roll in, and it's so easy to use. It's so simple. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds, and they've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. So right now, go download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's by downloading the app today and using the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get that first deposit match of up to $100. Now, don't forget, Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Are you watching Fox Sports on ESPN or your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, programs for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm David Ramil, the co-host of Locked On Heat. With me is Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked On Thunder. We're off to the Mile High City, where the Nuggets held on to a 1-0 lead in the series versus the Lakers, who had everything rolling offensively for most of the game. They were building a 20-point lead, and Anthony Davis seemed like he was dynamic. He had 30-something points early in the game. He looked like he was just going to be unstoppable. The Lakers looked like they were cruising to an easy victory. Not so fast. The Nuggets come roaring back. LA's offense just falls apart completely down to the stretch, with the exception of LeBron James, who scored 12 points in the fourth quarter, but he missed a crucial three-pointer with just 11 seconds left in a tie game, and that was enough for Jamal Murray to get down court, and with Anthony Davis guarding him, fades away for a mid-range jumper at the buzzer to give Denver a 101-99 win, and the Nuggets now lead the series 2-0. This looked like this was LA's best chance at trying to make a challenge here, because I don't think a lot of people expect the Lakers, despite their veteran leadership, despite the strength and overall greatness of LeBron James and AD, who looked really, really good tonight, a really good bounce back game for him. I don't think most people expect the Lakers to really make things all that difficult for Denver, but they had to have had a win after playing so well, especially offensively. They were shooting so well from the perimeter. They got a big bounce back game from D'Angelo Russell. Everything was dialed up, and then the wheels just come falling apart. They just really break down, especially in the third and fourth quarter. They just couldn't find a way to score. Only 20 points in the fourth quarter. Like I said, 12 of those coming from LeBron James. They just couldn't seem to get any kind of contributions from anybody else. And that was just enough for Denver, as we've seen so often in the past, to smell blood in the water. And they just keep coming at you. They keep coming at you, whether it's Nikola Jokic just not being able to hit from the perimeter, and a huge triple-double from him. What did he finish up with? 22 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists. A really big game from him. And he just backed down AD, who just looks, earlier today we heard Anthony Davis talking about why he's not considered one of the best defensive players. The players don't like him. He's kind of griping and whining a little bit to the media about why he's not a defensive player of the year candidate. Well, as good as he might be defensively, he's still not capable of stopping Jokic. And then that was just enough to, again, put the ball in Jamal Murray's hands and seal a victory for the Nuggets. What were your overall takeaways from that Nuggets win?
This has to be just so demoralizing for the Lakers. I don't believe that they can play much better than this. We can talk about their fourth quarter shortcomings, but at the end of the day, you held Denver to 101 total points while you shot 43% from three, and you lost the game. And it was just a game where, if Denver is capable, and we've seen that they are over the last couple of seasons, capable of these just gritty, finding a way to win, these avalanche moments like that fourth quarter, what are you going to do? And there was little to no hope, obviously, of beating Denver if you're looking at this from an objective standpoint. That's going to be the case for many and every team out west. That's why, despite not being the one seed, that they are the favorite out west. But whenever you lose a game like this, where you hardly give up any points in the modern NBA and shoot 43% from three, what's your next recourse? What's your next, kind of adjustment? Because there is no defending Jokic. So that he got 27 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, that's just what he's going to do. And you still were not able to get this win. I think that if you're the Lakers, it was critical, the LeBron James 3-point miss. And it's tough to put it all on one play or one moment. But in order to beat a giant like the Nuggets, those things matter. And I think that it was kind of a shot where you're looking at it from a standpoint of his defender fell, kind of felt forced to shoot that, so to say. I would have much rather him taken advantage of the defender falling and getting to the rim and trying to score at the hoop than to score from three. But who am I to second guess the best player of all time? I just think that the Lakers, like those little tiny mistakes, those going for the kill shot versus going to kind of extend the game, I think ends up mattering at the end. I mean, it was a tie game, and you could have really done damage there, or at least made yourself not get beat by that circus shot from Jamal Murray.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I think, we'd seen him get so many open looks through, side pick and rolls and things of that sort. Like, he was able to knock down a couple threes earlier in the fourth quarter. He was really their only offensive weapon in the fourth. They had an Austin Reeves jumper, a Taurean Prince jumper. And other than that, it was pretty much all LeBron James. And so I can understand his willingness to take that shot. As you said, the best player, he's got to be able to take that. And he also knocked down his defender. So he knocked down the defender. He's on the ground. He kind of looks him down. He goes, "Oh, I've got the ball in my hand. I'm here beyond the line. What else am I going to do?" The paint's packed a little bit, maybe driving to the rim. And he was exhausted. Like, you could see that earlier. He had taken an extended timeout just a few minutes earlier before he comes back and goes on an incredible offensive run. He might not have had the energy to put the ball down and get to the rim yet again. And it's tough to say, but at 39, this is what we have to expect from LeBron moving forward. He just isn't the player he once was. To seal the game like that, to want to win it, totally understandable, but it's a huge, huge factor. And I'm sure he'll beat himself up over it because that's who he is. He's going to obsess over that one play, but not able to knock it down. Bounces off rim, 10 seconds left in the game, and Murray with an incredible shot. A lot of people will focus on the Lakers, but I mean, for the Nuggets to have that kind of tenacity, to just withstand that punch, and they only shot 20-something% from three. So a lot of people are looking at this game as, Denver didn't play particularly well, and they still beat the Lakers. So I'm not sure how you feel. But I think this series might be over pretty quickly. It just seems like Denver is just too good to beat at this point, despite whatever failings they might have. But a bigger overall question, obviously you cover the Thunder. They're a team with contending hopes. You look at the Nuggets. Are they as strong a team as they were last year, based especially on their three-point shooting, which has not been as good as it was last season? And do you still view them as the overall favorite in the Western Conference?
In the Western Conference specifically, I do believe that they are the overall favorite. I think that Boston should be favored over them in the NBA as a whole. But in the Western Conference, you look at this game, what other team out West has the experience, the resolve, the grit to withstand what they withstood, where LA felt like they played their best version of themselves. They were the best version that they could play. They scored under 100 points. And then if you're Denver, Jamal Murray, who hit the game winner, it was not as though he was having a great night. He was 9 for 24 overall. As a team, you shot 23% from three, and you beat the best player in the world and a top 75 player of all time, according to that list from a few years ago, and Anthony Davis. Like, you still were able to overcome that. I don't know how many other teams out West can consistently get it done in this fashion. And then we know what they look like whenever they're clicking on all cylinders. And at that point, you're not going to beat the Nuggets either. So if they can do it both ways, which I believe that they can, it's going to be unbelievably tough to beat them 4 times out of 7.
Yeah, I happen to agree there. But we'll talk a little bit about the other series, one that's not getting nearly as much publicity. And it's probably because, the Orlando Magic just don't look very good. They've struggled offensively as they have for most of the season, but it's been a good overall effort for them. We'll talk about this game, and we'll talk about what it means for their future as we come up on our next segment here on Locked On NBA. First, I want to tell you a little bit about our friends over at BetterHelp. Listen, there's a lot going on with a lot of people, and sometimes you need somebody to talk to. You've got something that's been eating at you, and you're looking for somebody that you might want to talk to. Let's say you have a problem at work, but you know what? You can't really talk to a coworker because, they're going to have a perspective that's going to be viewed through the lens of being a coworker. Maybe you have a problem at home and with a family member or a partner, and you don't know who to talk to because, again, they're going to have that same kind of biased perspective. You need to speak to somebody who has an unbiased, clear view of what's going on, and just somebody who can give you the advice that you might be looking for to help you feel better and make lasting and permanent change. And if that's something that you're looking for, then you're probably looking for therapy. And if you're looking for somebody to talk to, a therapist, then give BetterHelp a try, because BetterHelp is the most convenient way of finding the help that you might be looking for. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. You fill out a simple questionnaire. They find out what your needs are, what you're looking for, and they match you up with a local licensed therapy, again, entirely online and fits your schedule. But if your schedule changes for whatever reason and you have to go find another therapist, or maybe you're not even quite comfortable with the therapist that you're currently seeing, then they'll switch it out. No extra charge, and it's very, very simple and easy to use. That's what makes BetterHelp such a great option for so many people. If you're thinking about therapy, give BetterHelp a try. So go visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnBA, and give yourself the help that you need. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. We're back here at Locked On NBA, final segment of today's show, and thanks to everybody for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, the host of Locked On Heat, and Rylan Stiles here, the host of Locked On Thunder. Wrapping up today's show, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Off to the third game on Monday night. Not quite a barn burner there. Obviously, a little bit of a blowout as the Cleveland Cavaliers, despite Orlando's strong defense all season, managed to score 96 points and beat the Magic 96-86. It was a 10-point victory, but one that didn't feel particularly close. The Orlando Magic continue to struggle. They just can't find any consistent scoring. Paolo Banchero went 9 of 20 from the floor, had 21 points. He was the only 20-point scorer for the Magic. And again, that's not a particularly good output there. They managed only 36% shooting from the floor, just 26% shooting from three-point range, 9 of 35 overall from the field. And, the Cleveland Cavaliers are a much better team, perhaps, than they were last year. We talked a little bit about it before we started recording the show. Rylan Donovan Mitchell had a nice game with 23 points. Got some good contributions from Evan Mobley with 17 points. Jared Allen with 16. Darius Garland finished with 15. They performed a little bit better. They had a good game overall. What's your overall thoughts on the Magic not being able to compete at this level? Because I think a lot of people view that team as they're a young roster. They've kind of overachieved. They're playing really well defensively, but their offensive struggles have been there all season long. And despite the hope that maybe they'd find some way to turn it on in the postseason, that has not been the case. They've only managed 160 some points through 2 games so far. Not really that good. So, what are your thoughts on the Magic, and can they make this a series moving forward?
Yeah, I don't think that they can make this a series this year, and that's okay. I don't think that that should be an overwhelming indictment on this Magic roster or on Paulo himself, but Paulo's their best scorer, initiator, and playmaker. I mean, and he's being asked to do all of this as a second-year player without a ton of complementary pieces and play finishers around him that you can rely on in the postseason. So I think that that's where it stems from, the offensive woes from Orlando. And so they don't have enough offensive firepower to win this series. I think that they, of course, I don't think they're going to get swept. I think they can win the game, of course, but win the series overall, I think is too tall of a task. I think that this was a fantastic regular season, a great step forward. They have the coach in place, they have Paulo in place, and they have the defensive structure to be, and already are, an upper echelon defense in the NBA. Now they've just got to figure out how to fit these pieces in together offensively and simply improve their roster. Like this is a team that is not made to go win this year and never were. And they were hoping that they could give you a scare or outright win a first round series. That was their goal. It's not going to happen to win the first round series, but that's okay. This team still has a ways to go in terms of improving their roster. And I don't think that it's an indictment to say that on their roster construction. It's just that they have 2 parts, the coaching and defense. Let's go get the third part next season and see where you land.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very fair point. We talked about on the show before. It should not be viewed as a disappointment. I'm sure a lot of people, especially in the Orlando and their fan base, they're excited about having this young core, something to build off, but that's basically what it is. They're at the ground level right now. They've exceeded expectations to a certain degree, and now it's just a matter of building and continuing to add the right players, the right things to their roster that will make them a more complete unit moving forward. It's a good group. I'm sure that we'll see them in the playoffs for years to come moving forward. If they don't botch the continuation of this roster, if they don't, add the wrong piece or trade away a certain player or something like that, because right now they do have a good group. It's just about adding to it. On the Cleveland side of things, you talked to me about it before. You seemed maybe not confident, but you seemed very optimistic that this matchup against the Magic and the way they've handled business against a team that maybe wasn't quite ready was more of an indicator that this is a Cavs team that is ready for the postseason challenges, unlike last year. What was the thought process behind that for you?
Yeah, I think that it can be a multitude of things. I think that this team is absolutely better than they were last year. They're handling it better than they did last season. You look at simply Jared Allen, who is like the main poster child of the lights are too bright. And he's had back-to-back really good postseason games now against Orlando. And we just talked about how Orlando doesn't have an offense and everything. So maybe you're down on the Magic, which I totally get, being down on the Magic as a playoff team in this 2024 postseason. But I think last year's Cleveland team plays with their food a little bit too much, and this becomes a series, and this becomes something that you don't want it to happen. This is 2 games where, yes, the total margin in this one's only 10 points. The Magic had a great run at the end of the fourth quarter where the Cavs kind of mailed it in a little bit, or else this would have been another 20-point victory for Cleveland. That's kind of the style of play that it was this entire time. This was over before it even began. And so simply taking care of business in these settings is a big deal. And I think that you've seen Garland hit big shots, you've seen Mitchell hit big shots, and kind of keep the Magic at arm's length the entire series so far through 2 games. The Allen improvement, the Mobley improvement from year to year. Not to say that they've kind of cleared this boogeyman. They certainly have not. They are getting a lot of help from playing a team that they've sought after at the end of the regular season to go play in the first round. And I think that their ride will end quickly next round against Boston. But just looking at year 1 to year 2 in the postseason, I think that they have improved. Have they improved enough, though, to be contenders? I'm still out on that.
Well, especially with the future of Donovan Mitchell still very much up in the air. I know a lot of Cavs fans won't want to hear that, but I know some teams that are certainly looking to acquire a player of Donovan's level, and if they flame out in the playoffs, as some might expect in the next round, certainly, then certainly we could see some changes to that Cleveland roster. But that's a conversation for the offseason. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Speaking of some player opinions, however, The Athletic released their player poll. It was an anonymous poll of what roughly amounted to 130 some odd players from the NBA. They were asked a multitude of questions regarding who the best player is, best defensive player, most underrated, overrated, things of that sort, best coach or coach that they'd like to play for the most. That was something that stood out to me as somebody who covers the Heat. Obviously, a lot of people, while the majority of those polled said they'd want to play for Eric Spoelstra, which I found very interesting. You obviously cover a very good coach, also somebody who's likely to win the Coach of the Year award. What were your thoughts on the poll? Did anything stand out from the questions that they asked those players?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing from the standpoint in Oklahoma City was the players' love of SGA. Because I think that sometimes in the national media, you're not really watching him play night to night. Yep. And that's partly because the NBA has done a bad job of forecasting the Thunder the last 2 years. They've just tremendously outperformed and have not had enough national TV games. And I think that like it kind of is viewed as like, oh, he goes to the free throw line and he scores a bunch. But in reality, he's one of the toughest covers in the league. And I think that he has the respect of his peers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Obviously, they also talked a little bit about players that they view as underrated or overrated. Best defender, Victor Wembanyama, getting an incredible amount of early support, something you don't really see. And I think that kind of speaks to his overall impact as a defender, as a player. Like, see, he's just viewed so favorably around the league. As a rookie, it's rare that you get that kind of hype, but we're starting to see more and more players just talk about him as this incredible one-of-a-kind type player. And you cover an incredible rookie yourself in Chet. And yet it seems like we're seeing Wembanyama just have an incredible impact already as a rookie, and that might translate into some postseason awards as well, and certainly down the road. It was an interesting poll again from that perspective. I like I said before, from the coaching standpoint, talking about a guy like Eric Spoelstra, who's known, and the system in Miami is known for bringing out the best in players. A lot of players gravitate towards that and look as that, not just Spo, but the franchise is a place that they'd want to play for. So it was just an interesting view into the mindset of players, but ultimately with only 130 some odd players, and certainly, or at least in my opinion, no superstars really chiming in either. It probably doesn't give the most nuanced or balanced view of those questions and the answers from majority of the players around the NBA, but it is a good glimpse into how some of the players think about their peers. So it's pretty interesting. Go check it out if you do have a subscription to The Athletic. Also, a little bit of news reported earlier today that JJ Redick of ESPN, of course, the Old Man and the Three podcast and Mind the Game. Now he's got that other podcast with LeBron James, is being interviewed by the Charlotte Hornets for their head coaching position. So I think this is the second time JJ's been involved in an interview or considered for an interview at some point. But what were your thoughts on that one? Because I've got to be honest with you, I was a little surprised to see JJ's name thrown into it. And I'm not sure that, obviously he's never had any coaching experience at any level, but he is a successful broadcaster and he was a pretty good player for a number of years. What are your thoughts about JJ and Charlotte's pursuit of a guy like Redick?
I think that if this is anything more than just hey, JJ's interested in coaching, so get in a room with people who make those decisions, hear what, you need to do to get to that spot. If it's anything more than that, it is a complete disaster from Charlotte. Not to just immediately say he wouldn't be a good coach, because I think that he's proven to be a very smart basketball mind. I think that he's proven to be able to relate to these players. Obviously, there's going to be no one better to understand the struggles that each and every individual player goes through than JJ Redick, because he's been the journeyman. He's been the superstar at Duke that was getting booed out of the arena and everything else. Like, he's played a vast majority of roles. The thing with JJ that I think for Charlotte specifically would be the wrong move is that I think that this Hornets organization is sort of flailing. Like they don't really have a clear identity. They don't have a clear direction. They have some nice pieces. Can LaMelo ever get healthy? Brandon Miller looked really good this year. I think that the biggest thing from Charlotte, top to bottom, from their front office to their bench, you need some actual stability, like some real, just genuine guidance and stability, not to incorporate a coach who's learning the job on the fly, learning the new intricacies of coaching, the day-to-day life of coaching with this young team and growing together. It can sound very cool, and if it did happen, I think that people would be sold on it. But I just think that for Charlotte specifically, with the struggles that they've had too, in terms of their culture off the court, they need an adult in the room, not such an adult of like the Steve Clifford adult, but they need someone who's been there and who's at least managed a roster before and is more than just a smart X's and O's guy, which I think that JJ is. But I think that they just need a stable, maybe a Budenholzer type of coach.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, I think he's only a couple of years removed from retirement. Obviously, I don't think he's separated enough from how he views himself as a former player, and he's still so connected with a lot of the guys in the league. I think it would be a little awkward, and I think that's not the right leader that you might be looking for in that particular locker room to, as you said, to build an identity and build a culture and everything else like that. It's not a knock. I'm sure he'll be a worthy candidate down the road. I just don't think he's quite ready for it yet, and he probably isn't the right fit for the Charlotte Hornets. But we'll see how that coaching chase progresses. As always, we'll break down all the best and latest news around the NBA, as well as any upcoming playoff games on the road to the NBA championship. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the week, and make sure to catch the rest of the great daily coverage of the NBA right here on Locked On NBA.